Enemies have their own prefab file, just like player bullets. But this prefab has some more functionality. There are a lot of new things. Some things our enemies need. They have an animation play when you hit them with a bullet. When you hit an enemy with a bullet, there's a sprite sheet animation that takes place. That's one thing. Not all enemies have the same key. We have green enemies, we have red enemies, and we have yellow enemies. Luckily for us, but not a coincidence, they all have the same dimensions, so we don't need to pass like specific dimensions for each type of enemy. We just need to pass the key. What else? Enemies have an explosion when they run out of energy, so that means they have energy, and they get hit by bullets that reduces their energy. Enemies also shoot you. They have their own shooting functionality going on. Some might shoot faster than others. Enemies move to the sides and they also move down. And when they reach the boundary of the screen, they bounce. So they're moving like this, like a zigzag. That's a lot of things to implement, so we'll focus on one thing at a time. In this lesson, I'll begin by simply creating the basic structure for our enemies and adding a sample enemy on the screen. So let's get started. On index.html, make sure that you include the new file enemy.js, which is located inside of prefabs. If you go to that file, I've already added the namespace part, and I'm gonna create this file now, so that you can have a look of what it looks like. Spacehipster.enemy equals function. We'll pass the game, we'll pass x, y, and we're also going to pass the key to identify whether it's a green enemy or a yellow enemy or a red enemy. We'll pass a health value, because different enemies will have different values for health. And we're also going to pass the bullets. We're going to keep track of all the enemy bullets in one single pool of objects. But that's to be implemented in a further video, in a later video. What else do we need? We need to do all the inheritance jazz so that it works properly. So we specify that the prototype of the object is going to be the same as the prototype of the sprite object. Prototype. So we have that, and we also specify the constructor of this prototype. Constructor, this is all keywords, JavaScript keywords that we're using. .enemy. Okay. Now, what do we do in here? We will call the parent object, which will be the sprite. We initiate that. It's sprite.call. This, we pass the context, game, x, y, and now we specify also the key. If we don't specify any frame, it will default to frame 0. Because remember that we're talking now about sprite sheet animation, so they all have different frames. So if we don't specify any frame, it will be frame 0, this one. The other animation will be for when you hit the monster, the enemy. Okay, some other things we want. There's going to be an animation which will be played when the enemy is hit. This.animations.add. Let's call this animation get hit. And it will go frame 0, then frame 1, then frame 2, then frame 1, then frame 0. 25 frames per second. And it doesn't repeat itself. So it's just like a flash, a quick flash of the enemy. Then the anchor point. It will be set to the middle. And health. Now, health is actually a property that all sprites have. So Phaser has this functionality of the health, and then it also has the ability to damage the enemy, and then if the health reaches 0, the enemy is marked as killed. So that's really nice that it's handled for us. It makes life easier. Also, let's just save these enemy bullets in an array so that we can use it later on. Okay, we should be all good now to create an enemy. So obviously not going to do anything yet, but we can create one. So I'm going to go to create, and I'm going to hard code an enemy. Update. This is create. Let's just call this enemy. Will be new spacehipster.enemy we pass it the game, this dot game, coordinates, let's say they will be in 100 and 100. It will be a green enemy. What else did we need to pass? The health, and there was something else, the bullets. We'll just pass an empty array because we're not working with that at the moment. And I need to add this to the game. To add an existing object to our game, we'll simply type in game.add.existing enemy. And that adds the enemy to our game. So we have now an enemy placed. And for that enemy, we used our custom prefab. So to summarize, we created a prefab in the same way than we did before. This time we added some different parameters, and including the health, which is a sprite property, and we added an animation as well. Other than that, it was just the same that we did before. And the other thing that we saw was how you can create an object like this, and then you can add it to the game manually. Usually we just use the game.add and then sprite. So we create it on the go and add it on the go. Whereas here we create it and then we added it. So that's the difference between the way we normally do it and how we did it this time.